Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unplugged Live. This is episode 22 of season 2, as we're calling it. I've got one of my co-hosts, Adam DeLay, here, and we've got our special guest, Rudy Wright, and he's actually just right down the street from me. And Rudy is an installer, a longtime solar enthusiast. He has been off-grid much longer than I've even been thinking about it, or at least yeah, I think, well, not technically off grid, but living off grid essentially. And he's going to tell us all about it. Great guy. He's got a ton of experience from both the doing it as well as the installer side of it. So go ahead and rack up your questions in the live chat. If you're coming afterwards, can't guarantee he's going to answer the question once the show is published. But if you're here live tonight and you've got questions, just as it says down at the bottom, add QQQ, just no spaces, 3 Qs anywhere in your comment, typically at the front, and that will make it so much easier for us to see. Also, one more bit of housekeeping. We always do our solar check-in or whatever we call it, where we want to know how much solar you're producing. And to do that, you're going to go ahead and add star, 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 followed by your kilowatt hours. And that could be a whole number, drop the decimal in there, whatever. And then your location, just like it says right there. So do that, do those couple of things in the live chat, and we will pull all that up a little bit later. But for now, let's go ahead and check in with Rudy and see how you're doing. Rudy, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and just where you're at today.
Yeah, man. I'm sure glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me to join you guys. I'm sitting in my office right now, which is also my house, but we've been building on this site since '07. We moved in '07. We've been only off grid since the beginning of this year entirely, but we've been building off grid capability since the original first endeavor. We had only fridge and lights at the house. And I did run a home run up to the office where I was able to tie in just the server at the office, the bare minimums. And it's been funny how a lot of the stuff that I originally put in to take battery backup power from my underground safe room down at my house elsewhere, now that we're doing the whole site and I've got to be up here by my meter logistically to deal with the whole site. A lot of that wiring has been repurposed and been really handy for like AC coupling. Because I was trying to figure out, like, I've got solar on my newest warehouse and it was on the farthest end of the spectrum. But when we were doing our final revamp late last year, preparing for our, off-grid graduation, we'll call it. But when we were doing our final revamping, I was, examining my infrastructure and trying to figure out, well, what can I do with this other stuff, and how can I put some solar on this far end? And basically by just skipping past it, where in my safe room, I just basically connected the one that was going to the office, the one going to the workshop, just together down there, and now it's a bridge where the AC
Nice.
up here picks up all of my solar perfectly. But yeah, so. I've been doing solar a long time. NABCEP certified is really, when folks ask me, how do you know if somebody knows their stuff? To me, if you've got, originally it was just one test. And if you were NABCEP certified, and I had to learn the hard way on a few questionable hires, NABCEP, you're hired, but they broke it up into designations. And you can be a NABCEP sales associate, you can be a NABCEP installer, you can be a NABCEP certified firm. I guess there's more money to be made, more layers of certification. But when I did my test back in '09, the pencil they gave us to go sit down with the Scantron said NABCEP, the test that's hard to pass. But the pass fail rate was literally, they said, anywhere from 15 to 30% of the folks are the only ones that pass.
Wow.
Because, you had to have, electrical, but you also had to have mechanical, because they're going to quiz you on, how to know if the fastener is going to be in deep, or what size fastener for what area, or how many fasteners. But yeah, and they gave you a lot of crazy scenarios where they just give you a few nuggets of info. Here's a latitude and a longitude and a couple of key components that what you have to work with. What kind of power are you going to make in a year with that system? ABCD. And it was fun. And I had a lot of good time studying, and there was a lot of really interesting folks there and it did prove out true. There was I think 500 folks in the class that we went took the test or whatnot,
Yeah.
and only like 100 ended up passing. But a couple of guys I studied with ended up running one of the companies that our local AG is going after. You know,
Ooh.
yeah, it's there's so many, and those guys seem like good guys. Not to drop names, but I mean, there's not that many that
Yeah.
he's going after. Cam Solar, when I studied with them, but a lot of people got on this trajectory where they wanted to just make money, and it was about cranking up this engine and duplicating it and making it an idiot-proof widget. And I just never liked that model, and I think that's one of the things that's made us different as far as Right-Way is, I wasn't going to hire any subs. I wasn't going to build a bigger team than I could train and really feel confident with. And then, yeah, along the way, that's really how I learned signature solar stuff. First calls I got were people that bought a kit, DIY, got halfway into it and were like, I think we're a little in over our head. So,
Yeah, well, I'm sure we're going to talk about some of that for sure. On top of that, on top of being a solar enthusiast and professional, I guess a couple things we didn't even discuss, but you're deep in the Libertarian Party. You're a prepper, I believe, if I remember correctly, or on that side of the
we'll go back to
spectrum.
that later.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And an entrepreneur at that. I mean, I remember first time we talked, you were like, I got like, I don't remember how many businesses. I want to say it was more than one handful. And so I think you're in really great company with this crowd here. That's seems to be half of the live chat. So I'm sure there'll be more questions on those topics as well. But yeah, thanks for being here. Adam, what's been going on with you this week?
Enjoying the sunshine. I mean,
All
it
right,
seems
that's good.
like we've finally gotten this short little stint where the rain is abated, and I've seen my solar being able to charge up my battery banks at least twice, up to 100%.
Ooh, all
Woohoo!
right.
First times
Nice.
of the season, which is always a great feeling. Working on building a garden for my wife, try to keep the deer out and all that stuff. Trying to make something a little more permanent than the baskets and the porch pots
Mhm.
that we've done in the past. And then my son ended up getting this idea in his head, like, I want to exercise during the summertime so that I can be ripped when we go back to school in the fall. And I'm like, okay, so I am doing an exercise routine with him every morning. So
All right.
that has been,
Nice. That's good, man.
yeah, it's been a thing.
Yeah, yeah. Wear you out.
Now you mentioned your batteries are just now getting full. Are you basically cycling them to a 30 or 60% of your overall capacity on a daily just to save some bucks, or?
I might end up cycling them every couple of days for full cycling. I mean, I've got, oh shoot, I don't even remember how many kilowatt hours I have of capacity. 120 maybe kilowatt hours of capacity.
Oh, nice.
So in Michigan, I could go long stints with no sunlight or very limited sunlight. So I don't get to see 100% as often as I would like to.
And so you're in Michigan now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that
Yeah, yeah. So our podcast is Rudy. We basically just really recently reconnected. That's what I'm trying to say. And so you haven't had time to go check out the channel or anything like that. He's just jumping straight on here. But yeah, so Rodney is over in North Carolina, South Carolina. I don't remember North Carolina. Adam's up in Michigan, and we just kind of phone it in every week. So
awesome.
And we've got international viewers.
That's right.
Got some folks from New Zealand, Australia, Germany.
I mean, y'all popped up organically on my news feed, or the videos I would likely watch, or however you call it. So yeah,
I'd like to hear that.
I love to hear that.
Yeah, I watched a good chunk of the first one before I called you, and
okay.
Yeah, I tell you, it's been hectic. I mean, the market's been so weird. We've been scrambling, doing a lot of the same stuff you're talking about, setting up our raised flower beds, and just getting a well put in, and I'm hoping, and at least if the tax man asks, this is all about marketing because we're going to market the self-sustainability aspects. It's now the tax
There you
credit
go.
gone.
That's right.
So yeah, it's a complete business endeavor. But worst case, we'll make sure our boys are fed in more ways than one, and hopefully show people what you can do with just 5 acres and 20 years of your life sweat.
And inside city limits too, right?
No, we're just outside, thank God.
Oh, he just out. Okay.
Yeah. Most everybody assumes I'm inside, but I mean, there's just a perfect little carve out, and thank God I am because, whether it's my biodiesel processing system or just the way we've hooked up, we've got 378 kilowatt hours here, but I've had an 80,000 kilowatt hour habit for a decade, and we trimmed it down. It used to be about 150,000, but yeah, it takes a lot to run a whole office building, warehouses. I've had RVs out back. I don't have anybody in the RVs right now, but I'm built to handle that, which is another reason why we're full pretty darn early. Thankfully, most any day the sun peaks out. But yeah, it's been a wild ride. Now I'm really excited to get to connect with you guys, especially hearing you've got Solar Assistant. I've been trying to geek out on that for the last month or three, but it's slow learn. But we're using it tied in through our Home Assistant and basically building a standalone whole site control command center where even if the internet's down, my smartphone on my network or any of my devices on my own network, I can still change settings on my inverter, check what I want to check, or get all of that key data. And more importantly, as more and more of us are seeing, getting to where you can yank that dongle and not have anybody else have access to the system. So yeah, we've had a lot of customers asking about that, especially when I'm sure you guys all saw the hubbub about, and I'm pretty sure they were potentially talking about EG4, if not Sol-Ark, but backdoors from China into the gear or what have you. And yeah, it's a reasonable concern. So.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, we've really been enjoying that and the data that's coming with it, and well, a lot of those little stuff, like I said, whether it be EG4's gear in general, that was back when they were only carried like grow watt, when we were people, early on with the DIYs. But even the first 18K, I had a client that we had done a couple of 6 that he had all electric home, and he had 2 6s. And I'm like, dude, you're not gonna make it through the winter on that,
Yeah.
So he listened to my advice and went back to Signature and upgraded it to 2 18Ks and got him another stack of server rack batteries and had us come back out there. And we've got a lot of folks that were really glad they found us. And that's it's a mixed bag on the DIY stuff. A lot of times I've come in behind guys where I'm like, dude, you need a job? This is killer work, But I've also come in behind stuff where I make sure I really couldn't touch any of this. I have some concerns for your safety, and wish you the best.
Without throwing anybody under the bus, what are some of the crazy things you've seen on a DIY setup?
Man, probably the craziest one to this day, and the gear was just a kind of a knockoff, like that Sonova, but it wasn't Sonova. It was a yellow brand, a yellow color. But kind of like a cat orange yellow, not the sun yellow. But long story short, this knockoff brand I've never really heard of, and had knockoff AGM batteries, but like those big, bigger than usual ones that you really don't like to carry one at a time. But long story short, he had daisy chained them all together with basically speaker wire. And it was thankfully decent gauge speaker wire for speaker wire's sake, but it was literally that vinyl in case. And then he it was just the way everything was daisy chained together and the way he was using it. He had like hacked a little chunk of 20 amp Romex on this 3,000 watt inverter, and then from there had hacked into this network of cable extension cords going every which way, and he would literally unplug his refrigerator in the kitchen and plug it into I guess he built an end on a THHM, and have that hardwired just wire nut on the other end. And he just picked manually what he wanted to run in his battery system when he had juice, and I guess unplugged it and put it on the other. And I've seen folks, do really creative installs where they've made a lot out of very little. And There's been a couple of guys that humbled me on the Sunny Islands. I thought I knew those things back and forth, and especially in these chat rooms. Oh my gosh, you call yourself an expert in a chat room, you better be ready.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just so many different systems out there. But yeah, that's probably the scariest one, was that one with the speaker wire. But and other ones like I've seen a lot, and probably the next thing that's scary that isn't very common is like raw PV wire running through gables, attics, down wall systems. I mean, just that stuff's just not supposed to be raw. I had one that literally they had conduit going in the roof and they had conduit coming out to the inverter. So when you look at it, it looked like they did it right. And I fixed a handful of things the first time I met the guy. And a few months later, he calls me back. He's like, "Hey, this other system's not working again." And we get in his attic, and the raw cable, they had drooped it so haphazardly, it had a nice little circle. And these rats decided that that was the best place to make their nest, and they were chewing on the wires. They had literally chewed the wires in two. There was a cooked rat right there in the spot.
Oof.
And I don't know how the house didn't burn down. I mean, and that's the kind of stuff that definitely I hate encountering. But thankfully, most guys that are going to spend the money that the gear itself costs, if once you get into enough scale of power to take on enough of your house to be beyond a rat's nest of extension cords, most of those guys, they do pretty darn good work. And I think a lot of people miss is really like subtle nuances that, arguably if you ask 10 engineers, 6 or 7 of them probably argue with me, but at least 3 or 4 of them might have a slightly different mentality on it. But like the bus bar cabling, I see a lot of DIYers where they'll like daisy chain across their batteries, and then the whole bank's coming off of one battery on the end with 6 or 8 or 10 batteries paralleled behind it, and trying to help illustrate to them or show them, look, if you take the positive from the opposite end and the negative from this end and wire it to where you're pulling across the whole thing, just both of them off this end and kind of stack the other ones back there. I mean, yeah, they are all pressurized vessels, if you will, and they're going to contribute, but that guy on the far end is definitely not doing as much work as this first guy toting all the load. And in many cases, the scarier ones are when you get to where they've got, unlike these lithiums, they'll stack 5 100 amp breaker server rack batteries, and then the last one down there is carrying there's 1,000 amps on a 200 amp max rated little piece of bucket, made in China. So yeah, there's there's a lot of kind of scary stuff out there, but they've done a lot of safeties on them, and that's been, I think, the saving grace for a lot of folks that are learning and don't want to let the smoke out, but do have some close calls. The old inverters back in the day, if you reverse polarity'd them, it was over. Smoke went out.
Oh yeah.
It's done. And I've seen my boys inadvertently do it at least once on these newer ones, and they they'll throw an air code, but they don't just let the smoke out.
Well, speaking of letting the smoke out, did anybody in the chat or either of you two see Will Prowse's last video? I don't remember if it was today or yesterday on the lithium iron phosphate battery, basically just letting it vent and trying to get it to catch on fire. Did y'all see that?
I did not get to see that particular one. I know everybody loves Will Prowse, and again, I should probably spend more time watching that stuff, but
he the flaming battery. Yeah, that was
is that
interesting.
the Battleborn one he's still picking on, or I thought he was over that?
No. This was just a raw cell he threw in a fish tank and let it vent, and then had a little electrode trying to catch the gas on fire, and it was interesting. The hydrogen it caught, and took a while. It took longer than I expected, but yeah, it was an interesting watch. I watched like 4x speed just to get it over with.
I would think he's almost basically electrolysis the water and making hydrogen and oxygen.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a response to...
It was an empty fish tank, though.
A video that was done by another channel, Stashed D Training. Pat did a video on somebody's solar room exploding due to a failure. And so it was looking into how many actual recorded issues of actual explosions are there due to cell venting And so Will was trying to see, well, what all does it take in order to get a cell to vent, and what all environmental properties are needed in order for that combustion to actually happen with the hydrogen.
So in other words, what combination of mistakes have to happen in order for really, really bad shit to
Yeah, and he
Yes.
ends his video saying, "Look, I mean, this is been
don't do this?
documented happening like 3 times or
4
twice or
times,
whatever it
yeah.
is." Yeah, I don't remember. So he's like, "It's super low. Here's things you can do to mitigate it." He's like, "I'm not changing anything in my shop."
Yeah.
It was so fun to watch.
Yeah,
And you know, to refer back to some of the nightmares I've seen, there's one jumped in my head as we were talking about this underwater and what trying to explode a battery bank. But I've always been real gun shy, especially once we got remote accessibility to inverters, to having these tech support folks changing my settings. And at first, it was always, I want you to help me, you know, tell me what's wrong and let me fix it because I'm going to remember it better. If you just tweak it and change it, I'm not going to remember tomorrow what the heck you said or did. And so I got my first real world example of another reason to be very sensitive about letting tech support. But I had a client that he had a nickel iron battery bank. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever encountered nickel iron. I've installed maybe a half dozen of them in our entire, 20-year almost history. So not very common, but we run into them. But he had a nickel iron battery bank, and we had upgraded him from Sunny Islands to the new Sol-Arks when they first came out. 12K, at that point. And anyways, this was one of those customers that, probably would be a typical DIYer, but he had the means to hire. He knew enough about it, but there were certainly, gaps in his expertise. But long story short, he was doing me a favor, and he was calling Sol-Ark Direct with tech support and just wanting to play with his settings and make it do some different things. And I always tell my customer, I'm like, look, if you want to do anything different, please call me first. Now, if you want to walk through every feature, every button, you want to try and learn how to program it, those guys get paid for that. And aside from this walkthrough where I'll show you how to turn it on and off and the basics, I don't have time to show you every single setting and what it does and all that. And that's where I leave it. I said, but please call me first if there's anything, but if you just want to geek out, do call them. Well, he skipped that. And long story short, they ended up activating some kind of setting where this Sol-Ark got on a hard charge and would never stop. And it literally exploded his battery bank. And it did not hurt the battery room, thank God. But he had a plexiglass cover over it because we had it sealed and a ventilation deal. It exploded the plexiglass. It spit the guts out of 4 batteries right in the mid apex where the midway point of the battery bank.
Dang.
But yeah, ever
Sounds
since
like
then, I'm super anal about no. You don't change nothing. You tell me if I catch you changing something. I'm definitely not going to be a nice guy.
It sounds like they
Man.
turned on some kind of equalization cycle, some high voltage
It
equalization.
was a glitch. They changed his battery setting from even being the kind of battery, and they triggered a constant charge. And but they wrote him a check. I don't know how much, but there was definitely a comma involved. And we ended up getting a whole new lithium battery bank and had to look back. But yeah, so be careful who you let touch your system.
Man.
Not all tech supports are the same.
Well, at least at that point, I'm pretty sure the company should be replacing all the equipment, but you still don't want to deal with your house exploding and all the things that can go along with that. Well, let's jump into some questions. Bill in Florida actually asked this earlier, and Rudy, I'm pretty sure you already answered it in the chat, but what brand of inverter and batteries do you prefer and why?
Yeah, I
If you
mean
had to pick.
that's been an evolving process. For a decade, I swore by SMA stuff. Sunny Boys, Sunny Islands, the AC coupling. They were the pioneer in AC coupling. Nobody else could do that until 10 years ago. But anyhow, yeah, the SMA product line was my go-to forever. And I don't understand why SMA seems to have given up on the American market, but they haven't done a model upgrade to their battery inverter in 15 years. I mean, and the only model upgrade they did 15 years ago was go from a 5,000 watt version to a 6,000. And sadly, like so many of these companies, you cannot mix the 5,000 with the 6. So if you owned a 5, good luck upgrading that bad boy.
Mm-hmm.
But they were very robust and solid copper transformer, and that was my favorite. And they were very reliable. I still have several out there working today. But as people wanted more and more features, the Sol-Ark was really the first big name out there with a touchscreen interface, great monitoring, intuitive operations and settings, somewhat. Um, and yeah, so I swore by Sol-Ark for almost 10 years. And then when their 15K first came out, we were slinging them left and right. And I just started having problems left and right. It was MCU boards having to be swapped out all the dang time. And then it was relays popping left and right. And then it was I have to go out there to update all the dongles because they just wouldn't talk because some other software, yada, yada. Or then when they did their own plant rollout for monitoring, it was a real nightmare. And several of my customers lost features like grid notifications. Your grid went down.
Oof.
Most people want to know that. Over
Yeah.
a year, my customers waited and begged and bothered, and they would never commit. So eventually, due to quality control problems and things like that, we left Sol-Ark and went to EG4. And even EG4, there's no perfect company out there. EG4 stuff, we got our whole system swapped over, and we were having drama. It wasn't working right, and tech support couldn't figure it out. And with Sol-Ark, I had nightmares that went on 6 and 7 months, and it took me threatening litigation and raising hell and 50 emails to get 2 dingbats to the site to look at the job and go, well, yeah, it looks like stellar work. I don't know why it's not working. Whereas with EG4, it took 2 emails and 2 weeks, and then they had a 2-man team of very sharp dudes come down here and spent the whole day. And come to find out, I had a software version. They were all the same, but one was a version that was released at 9 in the morning, and one was the same exact version number, but it was released at 3 in the afternoon.
Oh man.
And that, we went through countless other things, but that's the best thing we could put our finger on that was the actual culprit, because then they had brought me a brand new unit. Well, I had been through a lot of other minor dramas and a few other jobs while we were doing that, and at the end of the day, they left me that other unit for all my trouble because they'd known I was a handful of warranty work for them and said the other. Sol-Ark has never even sent me an apology email, much less a thank you card or Christmas gift or a labor dollar. And we slung, hundreds of their products. So yeah, to me, the fact that EG4 that quick, that early in our relationship to just come out, they've won me over hardcore. And then they're EMP hardened without having to pay extra. That's just included. A little stuff that they weren't leading with that before, but I was real impressed that they're like, yeah, hey, it's in there like ragu. But user interface has been really good. The problems that I've had with it, they've actually fixed. There've been some little things that, there's been the main thing that really I think is frustrating with a lot of these inverters is most every customer I have, and probably most of your DIYers, if you have grid or whatnot, you want to use your batteries as much as you can. You want to have a generator kick in if the grid's not there, but you want to use the grid before you use the gen, and you want to sell to the grid when all your stuff is full. Well, apparently, none of the modern current guys can do that combination of features. EG4, when I switched to them, I asked their head tech guy repeatedly that, because I had customers that were leaving Sol-Ark, going to EG4 for this feature. That's what they wanted. Long story short, it won't. So what we ended up doing to solve that, because at this point I had already promised a guy, and he spent a lot of money upgrading his gear, that he would have this feature, by God. So we found a 48-volt relay that's not too terribly expensive, that we can basically program to be the total generator control. And the only risk that we're bringing to the table with that is if the batteries happen to be dead low, the generator happens to come on, and then the sun comes out so strongly that there's extra energy and it tries to sell to the generator. Because I've now basically, it doesn't know the difference. The solar doesn't. But program the charge window to be very small, and the odds of that combination of things are so very small. I told the one guy that I made this promise to, I said, hey man, you've got, my usual 3-year warranty. It's on me if it happens in that window, but I really don't think it's ever going to happen. And you probably lose your voltage regulator, worst case, maybe the brushes on your actual generator windings. But neither of those are, oh my God. I mean, the brushes can be a pain in the butt to get to, but, the voltage regulators, 100, 200, $300, depending on what model you got. So,
Mm.
yeah, we've really just had to get creative and get outside the box to do some of what our customers want.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I guess if anybody has that exact specific need, they can reach out to you. Um, well, let's go to our sunshine report or whatever we call it. I'm going to make sure we are actually still on the scene.
Yep.
Looks like we are. Okay, good. So now if I can get back to where I can see it. Oh my gosh, as soon as I move my mouse, it covers it all up. But it looks like our high is 175 kilowatt hours. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, there we go. There's Rodney Hunt. We saw him. So Rodney is our other typical other co-host here. And he has been really beefing up his solar. Then we've got quite a few others. Look at that. There's a couple of them that are hitting that 100 and a little bit higher. So pretty cool. And then we've got the majority of us down here on this lower side, but overall pretty good. So go ahead and continue to put in your star, star, star. We'll monitor this one more time before the show's over and kind of see how everybody's doing. And that leads us into our next question, which was for Rudy. Let's jump back over here. Rudy, how much power do you make in a day?
Ooh, yeah. Today
Hold on, Rodney.
Last time I checked, yeah, we were at 259 kilowatt hours.
That is crazy.
But yeah, I mean, we've got a 6,000 square foot office facility, and then my entire house is out back. And it's 3,000 square feet, and then we've got all of our workshops and our warehouses. My wife charged her Tesla today, and I've actually got 62 kilowatt hours of my battery bank in for warranty repairs.
Wow.
So yeah, I would, theoretically could have maybe done a little more if I had more room to hold on to it, because my batteries get full pretty dang quick. I've tried to always practice what I preach, and we worked a long time setting this up. And of course, with the way they did, Biden changed the tax rules so overwhelmingly favorable to commercial. And I think that, potentially part of why the pendulum swung back the other way with Trump. But basically, they made it to where we were just silly not to overkill our solar, because there would be another time, especially like I said, in essence, you could do the appraised value of the installed system. So instead of, if I do it really cheap, I don't get as big of a tax benefit. Well, now all of a sudden I can get the appraised value of what the big boys would charge and come in and do it at my cost as a dealer installer. It was heavenly. And then the galvanized roof on my building was eligible to include, because again, the verbiage that Biden had added in his BBB plan. But man, yeah, it sure hurt us with that going away. We've had some slow spells in the almost 20 years of doing solar, but never as slow as this. I mean, I hate to be thankful that there's a bunch of jacklegs that screw people, but the service work and taking the solar panels off for the roofers have been really a lifeline for our great crew, and that's fun, because a lot of these folks I'll come into, they don't know anything about their solar. They never got shown how to read their meter. They don't know about their monitoring. Probably 80% do know at least their monitoring, but there's a solid 20 that never had it hooked up to the internet, didn't know. And so, yeah, whereas, most of what I've seen from the competition, they're just yank them down, put them up, and pray they work. We check the whole place out before we touch it, and we make sure if there's anything not working, I show the customer, hey, you got 10 panels bad before I touched it, just so we all agree. Because, yeah, it's the last thing any roofer wants, or certainly any installer wants, is, okay, well, now it's not working, it's your fault. Well, no, we
I want to come back around to the panels not working thing here in a minute, but let's see a couple more questions here. Rodney wants to know, where are you located? He missed the beginning of the show. I don't know what we actually said.
I don't think we actually said where I'm at, because, yeah, we did talk about I'm very close to you, not too far down the road. But, yeah, I'm just outside of Tyler, Texas, thankfully just outside of the city limits. We really got blessed with this spot. We were on South Broadway for 20 years. We started in 82. But when we lost that opportunity to stay there, I was, remember praying, I'd love to find a place 2 turns off the main road outside the city limits with room to grow. And the realtor that got called to list this knew me and knew what I was looking for. And as soon as they told him, they wanted to sell it, he said it's already sold, and called me. But yeah, it's a really great little spot we've got right here off of 155. And my biggest concern is, I've always felt called to help, and we're trying to set up a standalone off-grid facility right here, this close to a fairly, decent-sized town. I want to help as many people as I can, but how do you ever tell somebody I'm full pool, I can't help anymore, and then B, how do you enforce that if they don't agree? Hopefully we don't have to go there, but sadly, far too many will refuse to think about it or do any preps towards it, and for those of us that do wear a prepper label with, pride and without any, fear or concern there, I think you have to, you have to think about it. You have to, pray for that guidance when that day comes, if that day comes. But
Yeah, for sure. I got another question because sometimes our chat can be a little testy on this particular topic, but your wife drives a Tesla. I'm curious, are you still driving around that excursion with
believe it or
the
not, I
Cummins
do
in
pull
it?
out the excursion for special occasions.
Okay.
I had to finally break down and get another everyday work truck just because it every time the excursion broke, I had to make it better. But after 20 plus years of doing that, when it did break, it was a month or 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 process of making it better.
Yeah. Now,
But
were you running that on biodiesel?
yes,
Right?
for about 6 years exclusively on bio, and then we blended it for a handful of years. And then that was one of the contributing factors to when I blew up my motor in the truck, which was part of why I was revamping my biodiesel processing. And we did all of that, but at that point I had a brand new motor that had warranty, and so I wasn't doing much brewing, from there on. So probably the last, shoot, I guess since fuel got cheap, honestly, that's what it was too. When fuel was $4 or $5 a gallon after Katrina and whatnot, bio made a lot of sense. But when it got towards $1.75, being out in the shop sweating and playing with grease and getting rid of glycol, yeah.
Now, is your daily driver an EV at this point, or do you?
No, again, we do try and practice what we preach. I can run the bio, which is certainly somewhat renewable, or at least eco neutral. But no, I had to go ahead and get a 1 ton Ford. I do try and use her car when I can, and then I've got my little Mini that I still love running around in. That 79 Mini gets like 30 something miles a gallon, and why haven't we gotten better? Well, there's no money to get better.
Yeah. No.
Yep.
But yeah, so the big trucks we still got to do diesel, but all of my trucks are all old 5.9 Cummins diesels that I can run my bio on, with the exception of my newest one. I have a 2021 Trimmer that is my everyday driver, but it is the newest truck that I will tolerate because I'm certainly not going to have a remote disconnect or a nanny that does more than beep at me and suggest I might get coffee or take a break.
So I don't know. It might have just been a headline, but I'm pretty sure I saw something that said Ford patented a technology to basically snitch on you. It's looking at you through all the cameras. It knows who's in the car. And if it decides, hey, you might be someone who we think the police might need to know about, it just sends it off and there you go.
Yeah, I'd like to think, like I said, my 2021, I'm safe. I know there's cameras watching me because, like, if I cross the line a little bit, most often it's because there's nobody there and I don't really care. But so it'll tell me, like, hey, you need to pay attention. But it hasn't ever been like, keep your eyes on the road. The ones that are really going to be better, I think 2026 and up, and the tech's probably in the 25s, just not turned on. But
Yeah.
they're watching your eyeballs. Heck, I was reading that Ford can repo the car remote. You don't make your payment. First, they'll turn off your air conditioner and your radio and all your bells and whistles. Then they'll make your car drive to the dang repo yard.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can go down that hole, and I'm sure Rodney's mad he's not here tonight. But let's jump on to another question. Joe Schmidt says, would love Rudy's take on cycling batteries. I have an excess I have an excess to survive blackouts. So full cycles almost never happen here, but I top off every few weeks and let sit charged for a bit to bow.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I'm assuming everybody's lithium these days, and everybody's LiPo 4, or at least the ones that we're talking most likely. On that assumption, I was kind of surprised when my wife first got her Tesla, which is slightly different chemistry. We'll agree, but when they said don't go below 20 unless you really have to, and don't charge it over 80 unless you're doing a trip, because yeah, I mean, my initial mindset, you'd always want to fill it all the way up. But I've talked to a lot of engineers that built the batteries, and we used to install iron Edison, and literally you were looking at the top of all the battery cells, and I mean they just built it at a place up in Colorado and charged us a fortune. I remember when a 20 kilowatt hour battery was like $35,000 my cost.
Man,
But
that's
yeah, and then they're
crazy.
very primitive looking by today. I got a few in the shop. I got a lot of dinosaurs. We're going to do some training setups. But long story short, I see people all the time, posting about, I can't get my batteries over 99%. Oh God, I got to get that 100%. And I personally chuckle because yeah, to me, the lithiums don't have a need for, being absolutely pushed to their absolute maximum limit. I view batteries a lot like, and one of the engineers I asked about it gave me that, so I won't also credit for coming up with the whole analogy, but he said basically think of it a lot like a balloon, and if you got a balloon that you want to last a long time, are you going to regularly blow it up all the way to the very just shy of the point that it explodes, or are you going to try to take a little easy on it? And so for most of my systems, I prefer to be on like when they give you a range of your voltages, like some of my batteries I have a float range 53.6 to 54. Fairly typical. Some of them are a little hotter than that, but that's what a lot of the batteries early on were. 53.6 to 54 was a float. Well, in that scenario, I'd normally go 53.8. I'm not going to be the lowest setting because I'm not trying to just leave stuff on the table, but I'm not going to put it on the red line.
Mhm.
I'm just now getting into cycling my lithiums. Prior to probably 2 years ago, my amount of need versus my storage was so drastically wrong that to cycle any of my storage was silly. The grid goes down, I need at least an hour or two before I got to run the generator. Now, once we got to do some nice expansions, which was really brought on by the lithium's dropping, I'm sure you guys probably noticed. You've been in the game long enough, but 5 or 7 years ago, lithium
Mhm.
was a totally different price tag than it is now. And shoot, I'm seeing
Oh yeah.
16 kilowatt hour knockoffs for $2,000 on Alibaba. It's like, whoa, I ain't going there. I'm not that brave, but it's exciting to see things that cheap. I always want to
Yeah,
find.
but the new watt cycle, 16 kilowatt hour. I mean, it's like 2,400. It's a
Yeah,
nice battery. I got one down there in my well house right now. I'm doing a review on.
yeah.
That's pretty good.
But see, to me,
Yeah.
I want to know they've got really good tech support, and
Mhm.
most of these companies, it's next to impossible. I have
Yeah.
found like Renon, Harris Battery. You're gonna pay extra a little bit, but I mean, I can typically get a Renon in my hand and not be out much over three. So I
Mhm.
can have a reasonable markup and afford to buy the batteries and the cables and all the BS and carry it out there and install it and warrant it. I typically try and sell it for $69.95 if as initial offering, and drop it down to 6 if you're buying a bunch of solar or other stuff. But obviously if it's just a battery, well, a lot of people don't think about it from a solar perspective. If I sell you that gear and there's any kind of even if it's not my fault, for sure for the first year, and in most cases people are looking at me for at least 3. And I used to basically say you had a 5-year bumper to bumper warranty, but Sol-Ark pretty well killed that for me because
Mhm.
they had so much drama and they didn't care and they didn't pay anything. And I probably lost $100,000 on Sol-Ark's warranty work. And
Mm.
and so now I basically do a 5-year workmanship warranty, and I've had to modify my verbiage and try and watch myself when I'm talking with customers and just explain to them, look, for sure, if there's any kind of problem for the year, I'm on it, but I can't just bumper to bumper promise it for 5 years. But yeah, if there's any kind of drama in the first 3, we typically come running, even if it's manufacturer stuff. And there's a lot of that goes on. I mean,
Mhm.
when they first started doing comms, for the longest time we always programmed, but once they went lithium, everybody got into communicating and closed loop and all that fun. And it's every single time I've tried closed loop, I've got probably a half dozen systems that are successfully using it and enjoying it. So I can't say every time, but out of 10 years of it being a thing and trying it probably 30 times, 25 times, it has been a warranty repeat comeback call. And in many of those times, certainly the earliest ones, the first recommendation after 2 or 3 rounds of trying to figure out why it's randomly glitching, even the tech support's like, just go close the loop, open loop, and here's the settings you want. So, in my opinion, I think the closed loop's really been to try and make it more DIY friendly, and
it makes you feel better, but at the end of the day, it just really doesn't even matter. I mean, like I've run both directions, and after the overall hype of checking your battery status 17 times a day, and you get to the point where it just works, then it's like I don't care if it's an open or closed loop. I mean, just meh.
Well, and with Home Assistant and Solar Assistant, we can still get all of the data without having to be at the risk of my entire system shutting down because one Cat 5 cable has a glitch all of a sudden or gets bumped or what have you.
I did notice. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say with the closed loop, I think Rudy had a great point because anybody can't mess with a handful of settings when you're in closed loop because it's just going to pull that data from the battery. So you're not going to over discharge, under discharge typically because you're in that closed loop communication with the battery. So there's going to be less calls because, well, what's the good rate to charge this at? And, how come this setting doesn't work? It's like you just plug it in and it just works.
Well, see, and that's really where I was thinking, and I did a job. One of our first and big, nice off-grid projects was in Victoria, Texas. And if you don't know where that is, it's a long ways from Tyler, like 7 hours. In fact, when we went out to do the job, it was not far after Katrina, and we had to load all our gear on a flatbed towed behind their tractor to get across the swamped-out area. But long story short, we set it up on comms with that same thought. It's going to be more reliable for the customer. Most all my customers are not handsy enough to want to even get into settings. It's supposed to just work. We set it up and do it no matter what. But what I have seen, sadly, with most of the comms is, like I said, the early Sunny Island comms with lithiums, very troublesome. And we ended up having to abandon those several times. And we tried them with several different battery brands. And I do have, like I said, 3 or 4 different batteries. Some home grid. I got some other ones that are talking and working fine. We can make it work. It's proven to be less reliable to be in a closed loop from my experience, statistically, and especially when I'm dealing. Most of my clients are very, very dedicated to not wanting their system to shut down for anything short of holy shit, it's about to burn down. So they, if we're out off grid in the middle of nowhere on a prepper compound, we're not putting rapid shutdown under the panels and a disconnect button on the side of the bunker. So yeah, it's that's been our experience with it. And then it also, my other favorite thing about doing open loop is most of us are growing over time, and I've got 4-year-old Harris batteries, 3-year-old Harris batteries, 2-year-old Harris batteries, and then I've got a dozen EG4s. Well, then Renon gave me a better price point for a bigger battery, so I got a half a dozen Renons. Yes, with enough attention to detail and nerding out, you could probably make at least the Renons and the EG4s do a closed loop.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's just
not worth it. Those of us that get batteries to review and test and stuff, we're growing our battery banks over time with, every brand that basically shows up, and you just plug it in and make sure your cables are sized properly and your bus bar is sized properly, and we just run in acid. Or actually, I did notice and I don't know if the 6000s have this now with a new firmware update, because I just don't go in and check it anymore. When I was doing the FlexBoss 18, I noticed that there's actually an open loop lithium other. It's like it works as the lead acid, just off lithium, or it's just called lithium other, I think is what it was. That was new to me. I hadn't seen that setting. But we have got 10 minutes left, 11 minutes and some change.
You weren't kidding. That's by a lot faster than you think.
Yeah, it goes by
It's
super
the fastest
fast.
hour of the day, aside from lunch, maybe. So let's do kind of a little rapid fire question and answer here real quick. It's QQQ. Kerry's basically saying he needs to go find something to replace his speaker wire. He'll be back.
It's just a fuse.
That's it. Roy wants to know if anyone knows where to get the fire suppression that is used in these server rack batteries. Do they sell that just as piecemeal? Anybody know?
The only, I mean, I haven't seen like specialized for like being in the battery, that type of stuff. If he's pointing out at me, what I have seen is stuff that's designed. It's like it almost looks like a big stick of chalk, like you would draw on a sidewalk with, but you put it in your breaker box or you put it in your junction box or your gutter, and if there was a fire in there, it explodes with an extinguishing fog. I haven't utilized those because I try and triple check my connections and thermal scan it, and the plan is not to have any fires.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if you were compelled, I've seen that on Facebook recently. I don't know if it was predicting our chat here, but we'll probably all see it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Mike Solar Garage wants to know, Rudy, when installing ESS, what is your largest kilowatt hour install in a single battery room? At what point do you consider it a battery concentration risk for a DIY battery room such as a 20 by 30?
I got you. Yeah, our biggest ones are probably some of our bunker setups. I'm trying to remember in mental math. I have overmaxed out the Sol-Ark's maximum setting, which was 10,000 kilowatt hours. I don't remember exactly, or 10,000 amp hours. I'm sorry, 10,000 amp hours.
Okay.
But I do believe that same guy is right at 1,000 or 900 and change. The key thing, in my opinion, and we've done several that were 7, 8, 900 kilowatt hours. So pretty massive, very similar to what he's talking about. Not necessarily filling a 20 by 30 room, but we're typically in about a 20 by 30 area, or at least a 20 by 20. But having them all balanced to a bus bar, and bus bars rated, some of our biggest ones, we've literally had to build our own bus bars from scratch, to where we've got a 20-foot copper stalk going all the way across on isolators in a gutter, and then each thing of batteries, and then all of the feeds from the inverters are staggered across the bus bar, and everything's done so that each distance to each thing is the same as every other one. And if you do that, as long as you can maintain that, there's no limit to how big we could build one besides our own intelligence, creativity, and ability to balance the wiring. But yeah, what I see all too often is, and I do see a lot. I mean, I've had some really sharp guys that are DIY and poured me all over. But folks, yeah, I've seen guys spend a big chunk of money and buying a whole new, I think it was Stores server stack, and only to find out that it's a totally different cell count. And so totally different voltage range, and they couldn't even, activate it with their bank, and they went through a lot of effort and expense to have it fully installed before they got to that realization. And as far as some of the stuff DIYers miss, I think, that's some of the things that I've seen a lot is that, if you haven't done it for years and you're kind of at the mercy of the salesman, and or even when you pay for the design, those design people are not thinking about the best way for your gear to work. They're just trying to, check the box, get the check, and I've seen a lot of times they'll draw a system where you're very literally, doing one inverter and two batteries, one inverter and two batteries, one inverter and two batteries. And these are all their own little animal and can only contribute on the AC side. And while I guess there is some argument if you had limited room or if you're sprawling, I mean, it's neat that we can now do that effectively where EG4, as long as we can get a comms cable, I could have a set of inverters and batteries, around. But my montage has always been build it big, bad, and, robust. And if you break it, build it bigger, badder, and more robust. I like to get all my eggs in one basket and guard it carefully. But
there you go.
There are arguments for that, the distributed networking. It's just not my style, and most of my clients want the big power. They want to be able to know I've got 400 amps of service, and that's harder to reliably do if you're spread out, because the comms has to be that instant for it to all ramp up. Whereas if they're all sharing a DC bus bar, they're all tied in at the same point, I feel like your odds of having full duty performance success are going to be higher, and to me that's worth trying to cram it all in one area, because arguably if any one part of it gets taken out, the whole system's down anyway. So as far as trying to say, well, it's more redundant to have it broken out or whatever, the only thing you're really getting is if the place burned down, you might have a few things you could get up and going again if you're smart enough to reprogram them and set them up that way.
Man, all right. Wow, we are almost out of time. All right, we got to fly through these couple of questions here. Down in Texas, do you install soft starts?
I do when necessary. I mean, in the old days when everybody was trying to make a 5 or 6,000 watt inverter back up the whole house, oh yeah. But now that most everybody's slinging a 15K or an 18K or stacking inverters and getting a little more serious, we haven't sold any soft starts this year, but we do have some in stock for when the need arises. And if somebody has a need, we certainly recommend it. But I don't just try and sell like crazy. Honestly, if your air conditioning system's so old that a soft start is applicable, you probably really need to update your HVAC. Inverter driven is the way to go.
Good deal. My comments just disappeared, so I don't know why. So let me see if I can get back to it. And okay, here we go. We're back. Engineers Love Change want to know, does anyone know if you have to pay for licensed installer or installer code to commission your Grid Boss in the EG4 Connect app, or will Signature Solar just give you one?
Yeah, the installer code's typically 00000, 5 zeros, I believe. I think I said that right, but I always count.
Fantastic. Rodney, what's the best online course you'd recommend for someone wanting to start a solar installation business and actually learn real installs, code, permitting, and battery systems, not just theory? That's a great question,
That
Rodney.
is a great question. Glad you asked. Ironically enough, I happen to have a stack of a few of the better books. Let me see here, yeah. But there is anything that's NABCEP certified or on your way to NABCEP. If it's NABCEP eligible for those credits, that's going to be a worthwhile class. So, I would always just kind of point back to that. SEIA, Solar Energy Industries Association, I believe is the acronym stands for. They've got a lot of great classes, and there's several other ones. Midwest Renewable Energy Association. But yeah, if they're NABCEP eligible, the class is vetted and it's going to be building you credits towards the real designation that counts is that NABCEP, some levels, layers, or all of them if you're starting from scratch nowadays.
Awesome. All right, Mike Solar Garage, have you come across any battery BMS with shorted closed MOSFETs, and how do you check for it?
Well, I mean, most of the time when I've encountered MOSFETs, that's been in our surge suppressors and stuff. The problem that I've typically encountered with BMSs has normally been, and maybe that's also a MOSFET, but it doesn't fit my mental picture of what a MOSFET is. But the little COM card, they're just teeny on each cell, and they tell the BMS what each cell's charge is. I've had some of those go out, but like I said, in my mind, the MOSFETs normally they're blue and they're wrapped in a vinyl plastic, and they're typically found in like Midnight Solar surge suppressors. They're the sacrificial part that's going to soak up that extra juice. But the BMSs have typically been reliable. It's just the communications between the BMS and the inverter that's been problematic. If there's any glitch, hiccup, anything at all, the inverter shuts down, and to me, that's just unacceptable.
Oh, you're talking about the MOVs in the midnight.
Yeah, I think those are
suppressors.
MOVs.
That's true. I might be crossing over that term. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the little checker.
Yeah, the
The
MOSFET
MOSFET is that little card on the BMS on each cell then.
Yeah, the little switching turns on and off for charging, discharging.
Yeah, they can only adjust a milliamp of juice if we're talking about there. They can't turn it on or off. They can only if you're pushing out 50 amps across those 20 cells, it can throttle each one just a little bit, but it's almost negligible. I mean, if you really get into look at the specs on them, it's been pretty comical that I don't know.
Oh, yeah. The MOSFET is what actually controls when the BMS allows charging and discharging. So it can switch on and off to stop. So like when you charge your battery all the way up to full and it doesn't allow any more power to come into the battery, it turns off the charging aspect, but still is allowed discharging.
It's doing that by
vice
turning off
versa.
the inverter, though. I mean, it's throttling down the inverter because the relays inside are on or off. That's it. They can't them themselves. If the inverter's shoving 50 amps and that guy doesn't disconnect, it's going to take 50 amps. It's going somewhere.
Well, but the BMS has to allow or not allow power to come into the battery itself.
And it's typically doing that through communication with the inverter. I mean, I've never seen one yet that has demonstrated that it's actually able to throttle amps that I shove at it. I've seen them that won't give me any volts until I try and shove volts at them. But that would be a fun one to explore more in depth. I hate that we're out of time.
Yeah, well, I hate that we're out of time on that. We got a couple more quick questions. We'll just fly through them. What are your thoughts on hammered flat copper pipe as a bus bar?
I mean, if you're in a pinch, I've seen that be more useful as like custom making your own eyed end to build a crimped on end on your battery cable. I really don't think you're going to get enough copper. It just depends on how many amps you're going for. If we're talking a 5,000 watt inverter and a little 100 amp, lithium, you'd probably be fine with a 1-inch pipe, hammered together and make you a little bus bar. But we typically are doing plate copper where we're, 1/4 inch thick, 2 inches tall, and, however many feet long we need to have a reasonable amount of room, and then we'll tap and drill it. But that's definitely a good question. In a pinch, that is commonly seen in DIY, but it's kind of frowned on professionally.
All right. Before this last question here, Kerry said he's got some cheap used speaker wire for sale. And DCO says, any solar assistant tips or tricks for a home assistant? Man, this would be an entire show, which you might have to have you back on just to geek out on solar assisstant.
Yeah, and I'm definitely still learning there. There is a book that has proven very helpful, and I'm trying to remember. It's a digital book, but if you Google around for home assistant guide, and if I find it, I'll shoot it to you. We can add it in the comments later here, but yeah, there's a guide that has pre-written code for a lot of the stuff. That's really helped us a lot. Trying to have friends that are nerdier than you are, which thankfully I do. That's helped a lot. I was trying to get Mosquito to work. The MQTT thing was just kicking my butt for 2 weeks until my buddy finally made time and it took him like an hour. I mean, having somebody that could jump in and help, and that's really what I'm trying to hopefully get prepared to do, is trying to look for an opportunity to build that network where we can, especially with things like home assistants where it's open source. If you're into home assistant, you already kind of know that you're pretty tech savvy, you're pretty hands-on, so to me that's a great platform where we can come together as a community, because if there's nothing really to sell there but expertise, and obviously we'll give a much away in guidebooks and pieces. That guidebook I bought was $50, I think, but it was well worth it. Even my nerdier than me friend agreed that was money well spent.
Very nice. All right. Well, we'll have to nerd out on that here on an upcoming show. Let's do one last thing real quick. Jump back over and see what our sunshine report looks like. And more numbers have definitely come in. I got to wait for it to go down. Looks like, can I drive in this? 3 different people over 100, and that's under 200. Man. I've got to get that up. So, man, look at that. Yeah, and I guess it's 4 if we consider Rudy and his numbers.
Rudy's, yeah.
Of course, we got to get that 200. All right, we'll do that next time. Quite a few of you guys chimed in. 34 people did. The average is 47.9, which is, I believe, pretty darn close to what it usually is. I'll have to go back and check that. And then the high is 175, which is Rodney outside of Rudy's. So that's pretty cool. Jump back over here for a second. Thanks everybody for your questions. Great questions coming in. Rudy, thanks again so much for coming on. I'm staying over a little bit late. Tell everybody real quick, and we'll give you the last word, just kind of where they can find you if they're needing some help in East Texas or the Bahamas or wherever you're at. Yeah, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, beautiful. We just redid our website at www.wright-way.com. Obviously that's the best place to be able to go and see examples of our work. And I'm not legally allowed to be working in the Bahamas, but thank God I've got a client that's encouraged me to vacation there twice this year. help him with the project.
Nice.
But yeah, we've done a lot of fun stuff off grid, and my cell phone's pretty much always on. I try not to charge people for quick consults or what have you. But obviously we are, a firm that does try to earn our living with our solar expertise. But we have very reasonable rates, and we can certainly help people solve just about any problem. I mean, we've probably invested $30,000 in our testing gear just to make sure we've got all the right stuff to be able to diagnose any problem and not just throw parts at it or guess, because that's always been my least favorite. But yeah, my again, the website's the best way. My cell phone, I'll go ahead and throw out there again. We welcome calls at 903-352-0298. And I'm so thrilled to see there's so many folks, enthusiastic about solar and out there doing this stuff, on their own and in their community, and to see that you guys are that far apart. I know I've seen you, Adam, somewhere in person, or at least it sure seems that way. But great to get to meet you here on the stream, and I really appreciate y'all sharing your platform with me to come and talk solar, because it's my favorite thing. I tell you, to all my friends and family, solar, silver, food, or bullets. If you've got any extra in the bank, do something with it before they print it into oblivion.
There we go. All right, guys, we're just going to leave it at that tonight. Appreciate everybody. Phone's ringing. Appreciate everybody sticking around. We'll talk to you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, guys.